Imagine, just for a second, your absolute favorite sci-fi movie.
Like something really gritty, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like The Matrix, or maybe Blade Runner 2049, or even Children of Men.
Right.
Normally, you're just sitting on your couch, you've got popcorn in hand, and you're absorbing these incredible dystopian landscapes as, pure escapism. It's just Friday night entertainment.
Totally. It's a way to tune out.
Right. But I want you to shift your perspective entirely for this. Imagine that the film isn't a distraction. Imagine you are watching it as a highly practical, literal instruction manual.
A blueprint.
Exactly, a blueprint, like an actual guide for building a self-sustaining, completely off-grid city right from the dirt up.
Which is wild to think about because it fundamentally rewires the whole relationship between the screen and the viewer.
Yeah.
When you approach a film like that, it ceases to be this passive consumption experience. It becomes a literal toolkit, a mechanism for physical survival, and really societal engineering.
And that brings us to today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping into a profoundly visionary essay by Benoit Nouni-Lapierre.
It's such a dense, fascinating piece of work.
It really is. And the mission for our deep dive today is to explore how a specific community in Kenema district, that's in Sierra Leone, is doing exactly what we just described.
Right.
They are taking incredibly dense cinematic theory and using it to forge a brand new, tech-enabled, completely off-grid civilization.
Yeah, and to really grasp the weight of this, I think we have to ground ourselves in the physical reality of Kenema first.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So this is a district in eastern Sierra Leone, and it operates as this geographical and cultural palimpsest.
Meaning like layers of history written over each other?
Exactly. You have a landscape that is still marked by a post-war reality. It's populated by diamond miners, Mende-speaking rice farmers, motorbike taxi riders.
Zapata riders, right.
Yeah, exactly. And importantly, there's this booming demographic that the author refers to as a tribal modern tech cohort.
I love that phrase, tribal modern tech cohort. And there's this beautiful detail in the source text about the name of the city itself, Kenema.
Oh, the translation.
Yeah, in Creole, the word literally translates to clearing in the forest.
Which is so vital to everything we are going to talk about today. Because a clearing isn't the destruction of the forest.
Right, it's not like paving over it.
No, it's the intentional carving out of a communal space within a massive, complex ecosystem. For this community, being off the grid isn't defined by what they lack. They aren't like romanticizing poverty.
Right.
It's defined by the absolute plenitude of what they can create inside that clearing.
It really makes me think about how we typically consume media today. I mean, for most of us, it's essentially a diet of empty calories.
But 100%.
We binge watch a streaming series. We scroll through, endless short form videos, absorb hours of content, and then we just go to sleep. Nothing changes in our physical world.
You wake up and everything is exactly the same.
Right. But the youth in Kenema are completely flipping that script. They are treating these global blockbuster movies like open source architectural blueprints. They extract the design intelligence to build their actual reality.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to understand how you physically build an off-grid compound from a movie, we first have to understand how this community has revolutionized the very act of watching.
Okay, let's get into the theory then.
Yeah, so the author introduces this theoretical framework to explain the shift, and he calls it the double transversal transjective quadratic model. I know. For the sake of brevity, he refers to it as the delta t-squared model.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because double transversal transjective quadratic model sounds like the title of a white paper designed to put you into a coma.
It is a mouthful.
If we strip away the academic jargon, what does this actually look like for, say, a 19-year-old holding a smartphone in Kenema?
So, stripped down, this model is basically a four-part puzzle. It turns filmmaking from this top-down Hollywood studio process into a lateral, community-driven engine.
Okay, lateral meaning everyone is involved.
Exactly. So the first piece of the puzzle operates on what the author calls the temporal spatial axis.
Time and space.
Right. The goal here is to break away from linear Western time. Traditional Mende storytelling doesn't follow a strict A to B to C timeline.
It's not a 3-act structure.
No, it's circular. It folds back on itself. So when these creators edit their smartphone films, they use heavily looped video structures, dream sequences, things like that, to mimic that ancestral rhythm. The digital edit literally reflects their cultural memory.
That makes a lot of sense, honestly. Our own memories don't work chronologically anyway, right? They're triggered by associations.
Exactly.
So a Hollywood three-act structure might actually be a less accurate reflection of how humans experience time than a looping, Mendy-inspired edit.
That's a great way to put it.
But, okay, if you're bending time in the edit room, who's actually capturing the footage? Because it seems to me that the very act of pointing a camera establishes a hierarchy. There is the observer with all the power and the subject being observed.
Which leads us directly to the second part of the model, the self-other dynamic.
Okay.
The community actively dismantles that exact colonial hierarchy you just mentioned by rotating camera operators directly from the audience.
Really?
Yeah. The characters in the film are actually co-authors.
Okay, wait, I need to push back on that slightly.
Sure.
How does handing a smartphone around actually change a deeply ingrained social hierarchy? I mean, it sounds like a really fun community exercise, but does it really erase power dynamics?
Well, it doesn't erase them, but it redistributes the agency required to document reality.
Okay, I see.
Think about it. If a single, untouchable director controls the lens, they control the narrative of the entire community.
Mhm.
By continuously passing the camera around, the act of filming reorganizes their social structures in real time.
So the subject is never trapped as just a subject.
Exactly. They know they will soon be the author. It creates a shared vulnerability, but also a shared authority.
Wow. It turns the camera from a weapon of surveillance into a tool of mutual recognition.
That's spot on.
So we have the looping of time and the rotating of the lens. How do they handle the actual visual content? Because they are dealing with very raw, real-world environments out there.
And that happens on the third axis, the immanent transcendent axis. This is where the creativity just completely explodes.
Okay, how so?
They blend the hyperlocal, gritty reality with the invisible or the sacred. So you might have an extreme, unpolished close-up of someone doing mundane labor.
Like fixing a bike?
Yeah, repairing a motorbike engine or cooking rice over a fire. But it's overlaid with digital visual effects created entirely on free phone apps.
Oh, wow.
It generates this homegrown West African magical realism. The mundane becomes transcendent.
But okay, you can create this incredible magical realism, but if you're truly off-grid, how does anyone actually see it? If you aren't aiming for a Netflix distribution deal or, uploading it to a centralized cloud server, how do you build an audience?
You ditch the colonial distribution grids entirely.
Just bypass them completely.
Completely.
Right.
This is the fourth piece, the center-periphery axis. You share these films via localized Bluetooth clusters, or you physically trade them on USB sticks at the weekly Luma market.
Oh, that's amazing. Like a sneaker drop, but for local cinema.
Basically. And you project them using solar power onto the whitewashed walls of a village. The community becomes its own closed-loop distribution network.
It's a completely decentralized media ecosystem.
Yes.
But to go back to the films themselves, the source material talks about a psychoanalysis of creation.
Right, the psychological aspect.
It specifically mentions how movies like Dogville, The Matrix, and Blade Runner 2049 fit into this process. But I really need to understand the underlying mechanism here.
Okay.
How does watching Neo dodge bullets in The Matrix practically help a community process the trauma of the Sierra Leone Civil War or, the Ebola outbreaks?
That is the crux of the essay's psychological argument. Because trauma, by its very nature, destroys narrative.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When a civil war or an epidemic hits, life stops making sense. It becomes pure, chaotic terror. So in this framework, sci-fi and dystopian films act as symbolic machines.
Symbolic machines.
Yeah, a film like The Matrix deals with an invisible systemic threat that has trapped humanity. Well, Ebola is also an invisible systemic threat.
Ah, so they map the real-world chaos onto the fictional structure.
Precisely. By taking a chaotic, completely unmanageable real-world fear and projecting it onto the rigid, conquerable rules of a sci-fi universe, the screen acts like the psychoanalyst's couch.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
The film imposes a structure on the chaos. The community watches these films to safely metabolize collective traumas. They are the analyst, and the film's symbols are the symptoms they work through together.
Which allows them to regain their psychological agency.
Exactly.
So the cinema essentially acts as a sandbox for diagnosing and processing their reality.
A therapeutic sandbox, yeah.
But here is the friction point. Once you step out of that cinematic sandbox and start physically building this off-grid society, you hit a massive wall.
the language barrier.
Right, because if you are using English or Creole, you are using languages that are deeply tied to a colonial past. You're using the master's tools to build a new house, essentially.
And you can't do that.
The author argues that you cannot construct a decolonized, self-sovereign future using the exact same civilizational grammar that built your captivity.
You absolutely can. Inherited words carry inherited boundaries.
Give me an example.
So if you use a word like development, but the global economic system insists that development only means imitating a foreign Western corporate structure, you are trapped by the very vocabulary you're using to try and free yourself.
Right. The word itself is a trap.
Exactly. And this brings us to a process the text calls etymological hybridization.
And from what I read, this isn't just like sprinkling a few local slang words into an English sentence.
No, not at all.
It's a deliberate, highly technical collision of languages. They are mixing traditional Mende, Creole, Global English, and the literal syntax of coding and software.
The author provides this highly specific, really striking example of this happening in real time.
Oh, the boy in the forest.
Yes. Imagine a short film produced by this cohort. There's a scene where a young boy is using smartphone footage to communicate with the forest spirit. Mid-sentence, his dialogue shifts seamlessly from ancient Mende to street Creole and then straight into HTML coding language.
HTML. That detail honestly stopped me in my tracks.
So jarring.
Yeah, because HTML is purely structural. It dictates how things are displayed and connected on a web page. So blending that with Mende, which holds the cultural and spiritual history.
And Creole, the relational street language.
All right, they were literally trying to program reality.
That's exactly what they're doing.
But I have a major hang-up with this.
Okay, what is it?
The source notes that they intentionally choose not to subtitle the sacred Mende terms in these films. If the ultimate goal is a new civilizational grammar, aren't they just siloing themselves? If I'm watching this film in New York or Tokyo, I am completely locked out of the experience.
Well, what's fascinating here is that the alienation you would feel in New York or Tokyo is the entire point.
Really? It's on purpose.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It is a deliberate, engineered friction. By refusing to translate those sacred terms, the film forces the global non-Mende viewer into the humble position of an outsider.
Oh, wow.
You're made to listen to a mystery you do not possess the rights to fully understand.
So it's not a mistake in the edit room, it's a boundary line.
Exactly. It completely disrupts the traditional flow of global media. Usually the West is the center, and local cultures are translated and packaged for Western consumption.
Right, consumed like a product.
Exactly. But here, the local language, the Mende term, becomes the untranslatable center of the universe, and the global viewer is pushed to the periphery.
It's an act of profound linguistic sovereignty.
It really is. The author refers to this ongoing creation of language as verb forging.
Verb forging. I love that. It implies language isn't just spoken, it is struck like hot iron on an anvil.
Very active, very industrial.
And that leads to the ultimate hybridized word in the text, the name of the civilization they're actually trying to build. Promutopia.
Yes.
Can you break down the mechanics of that word for us?
So it's this brilliant collision of three distinct concepts. First, you have the Promethean element.
Like stealing fire from the gods.
Exactly, the mythological act. Second, utopia, spelled with an E, which translates to the good place.
As opposed to utopia with a U.
Right, which means no place.
Ah, interesting distinction.
And third, the French word feu, for fire, layered with a possessive trace mieux, meaning my own place.
Stealing the fire to build your own good place, that is a very active, risk-bearing concept.
It is not a naive, passive hope. It means stealing the technological fire from modern empires, from Silicon Valley, from global supply chains, and using it to power their own localized reality.
Wow.
It's a future built with cement, solar panels, AI, and communal dignity.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because we've spent a lot of time on theory, the movies, the trauma processing, the hybridized language.
Fun stuff.
Right. But let's bring this down to the dirt. Kinema isn't a digital construct. It's a physical place.
Yes.
How does this Promutopia physically function in the red laterite soils of Sierra Leone? Like, what does it look like when you actually pour the concrete?
This is probably the most vital translation of the entire essay. The off-grid living happening in Kinema is not some primitivist fantasy.
Right.
We often hear off-grid and picture like a cabin in the woods, a retreat from modernity. This is the exact opposite. It is a highly advanced technical compound.
How advanced are we talking?
We are talking about 15-kilowatt solar architectures, We are talking about Starlink satellite uplinks, providing global internet, deep earth boreholes tapping into independent water tables,
Wow.
and 14-foot reinforced boundaries enclosing a 300 to 400 square foot living space.
It's essentially a physical firewall.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, when I read about the deep earth boreholes and the 14-foot walls, it just clicked for me. They aren't running away from the world, they are building a fortress to filter it.
Yeah.
If a centralized government or a foreign NGO controls your water and your electricity, they control your politics.
Absolutely they do.
So by building this enclosed transjective zone, they actively block out neo-colonial dependency.
You've hit the nail on the head. Deterritorialization, in this context, isn't about fleeing. It's an intensification of their own ground.
Right.
They are escaping the false territory imposed by dependency. The waiting for elite permission, the reliance on a failing centralized grid. The off-grid compound is the new cinematic set, and they are writing a physical counterscript.
So within this physical firewall, what does movie night actually look like? Because clearly, you've rejected the multiplex.
Oh, completely.
You don't have a massive IMAX theater with assigned seating in Prometopia.
No, because a central cinema hall with fixed seating is actually a piece of colonial architecture.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Think about it. It dictates how you sit, it forces you all to look in one direction, and it keeps the projector, the source of the light, and the information locked away in a booth controlled by someone else.
Controlled by the projectionist or the studio.
Exactly. Instead, this community has built a decentralized microcinema network.
It's totally fluid.
Very fluid.
Instead of a theater, it might be a pico projector shining a film onto a whitewashed wall in the marketplace.
Or it might just be a cracked smartphone screen propped up on a motorcycle handlebar as the sun goes down.
The author describes the film migrating almost like a spirit from device to device, doesn't he?
He does. It's hosted momentarily on a Bluetooth cluster, watched in fragments by different groups, and then recreated through gossip, debate, and retelling.
It's a community-engineered home that floats freely off the grid.
Totally unbound from centralized control.
I have to admit, though, if you just list the raw ingredients of what we discuss, 14-foot reinforced walls, independent water supplies, metabolizing severe historical trauma, hacking global tech.
It sounds heavy.
It sounds incredibly heavy. It borders on a survivalist bunker mentality. How does this community not just collapse into paranoia or dystopian dread?
Because the true engine-making Prometopia work, according to the author, is the exact opposite of dread. The engine is joy.
Okay.
This brings us to a crucial concept in the essay called JAOA, Joyful Afro-Optimist Acceleration.
How does that differ from the accelerationism we hear about in the West? Because, Silicon Valley accelerationism often feels incredibly melancholic.
Oh, very doom-driven.
Yeah, it essentially says, let's race to the bottom, let the current systems collapse as fast as possible so we can start over on Mars or something.
Right. Western accelerationism anticipates a post-human apocalyptic end. But JAOA flips the effect completely.
Okay.
It is deeply optimistic because it has an entirely different destination. It isn't accelerating towards societal collapse. It is accelerating toward Prometopia.
Toward the good place.
Yes. It's fueled by the joy of creative bricolage, the thrill of making do with what you have and actually surpassing the slick proprietary logic of Silicon Valley. It's about the sheer dignity of building a future with your own hands.
But the author is careful to point out that this joy isn't denial, right?
Not at all.
It's not a toxic positivity where they just ignore the scars of the Civil War.
No, joy here is utilized as an energy discipline.
An energy discipline.
Yeah, they take the darkest themes from the films they watch, the brutal extraction of resources in There Will Be Blood, or the absolute surveillance state in The Matrix, and they use them as architectural warnings. They take the historical wound, they metabolize it, and they convert that energy into literal off-grid infrastructure.
So what does this all mean for you listening to this right now? It really forces a mirror up to how we interact with the devices in our own pockets.
It really does.
For most of us in the West, a smartphone is purely a commodity. It's a consumer product designed by a massive corporation to extract our attention and sell us things.
A slot machine in your pocket.
Right. But in Kenema, this tribal modern tech community views that same piece of plastic and glass entirely differently. They don't see the camera as a commodity, they see it as a shared eye.
And that profound reframing changes the mechanics of everything they do.
How so?
Well, A Bluetooth file transfer isn't just moving ones and zeros. It becomes a literal form of the gift economy.
Right, because there's no internet provider charging you for it.
Exactly. A digital file, a film edited on a phone, isn't just content to be consumed and discarded. It is treated with the reverence of a cultural artifact, almost like an ancestor.
The tribal intelligence of holding a community together through symbol and ritual merges perfectly with modern technical capability.
It's a staggering synthesis. Think about it. The child who has the digital prowess to jailbreak a smartphone is using that exact same intellectual capacity to craft the narrative puzzle of a film that loops time.
And then applying that same logic to wire a 15-kilowatt solar array.
Yes. Academia usually separates film studies, infrastructure, theology, and technology into completely isolated university departments.
They're totally siloed.
Right. But real life in Kenema forces them all together. The same person has to think about solar panels, cinema, child rearing, and language all at once.
That is the unpredictable, holistic intellectual prowess the author is so excited about.
Exactly. They have proven that cinema isn't merely something to be watched. It is a mechanism that trains the human imagination to build physical worlds.
It's incredible. We've covered a massive amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started with a dense psychoanalytic film theory, the delta T-squared model. We explored how a community in West Africa takes that academic framework and turns it into a literal toolkit.
Right.
They forge a hybridized, code-infused language. They build a physically independent, solar-powered, off-grid compound behind a 14-foot firewall, and they fuel the entire civilization with joyful Afro-optimist acceleration.
They have effectively turned the movie theater into a civilizational engine.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, it leaves us with a fascinating and perhaps slightly unsettling realization.
What's that?
Well, we've talked about how this community uses off-grid tech to create a physical firewall against dependency. But what happens when these isolated sovereign digital islands start generating their own massive data sets?
Wow, yeah.
If Promeutopia succeeds, they aren't just building a local community. They are forging an entirely new, unsurveilled physical internet.
That's a huge thought.
So the question for you to mull over is this. How long until a network of these localized, joy-driven firewalls begins to directly challenge the global data monopolies that currently assume they own the world's information?
It's a matter of time.
And are we prepared for a future where the internet is no longer a global monolith, but a patchwork of highly defended, fiercely independent clearings in the forest? And more importantly, what unseen scripts and dependencies are currently dictating the architecture of your own neighborhood? And what films would you need to watch to figure out how to dismantle them?